Okay, so I'm just going to talk for a few minutes and try and give a little bit of context around the project. So my name's Emma Wren. I'm technical principal at Mott MacDonald for nature-based solutions, and I'm really passionate about everything linked to rivers, the local community and the environment. So nature-based solutions is a really, really good fit for me. And I'm really proud of the fact that in the middle of last year, we launched the Natural Flood Management Manual, the Syria document, and it's sort of the new go-to guide for the design and delivery of natural flood management in the UK. And I really, really want it to really keen that it's there to improve confidence, to improve outtakes and to outcomes, and to improve uptake of natural flood management and nature-based solutions in the UK, so that together we can all achieve more and help to tackle the nature and climate emergencies. Gone the wrong way, have I? Okay, rogue slide.
You're welcome.
So just a little bit of context how we got to where we are now. So in 2016, we did a project working on Colling and Beck, which is a tributary of the River Wharfe in North Leeds. So that's a small catchment, and it's actually the catchment where I live. And I got together, I put the project in for the DEFRA community natural flood management pilots, and we were successful in getting some money for that, and put together a team. It was led by the Yorkshire Dales Rivers Trust, Dan being involved there, who's talking afterwards, and got together with lots of different partners. We had the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, the Environment Agency, Leeds City Council, East Keswick Wildlife Trust, and essentially did quite a sort of opportunity-led project. But we did do a little bit, we fed in a little bit of straightforward hydrological analysis and some simple modelling, but really got things going on the ground and built some momentum up. In 2018, we started working with the Environment Agency and the City Council on this Leeds Natural Flood Management Project. It was a really big opportunity to do something at a much bigger scale, a more strategic scale that really warranted a really strategic approach. And Paul's going to talk about some of the tools that have been developed and some of the methodologies. But alongside that, there were some pilot projects that Paul will again say a bit more about, but really all about that building momentum and getting things going, learning from what we're doing so that we can get others involved and build that momentum. And at a similar time, towards the end of 2019, we started work on the development of the Syria Natural Flood Management Manual, along with we were all involved. So I worked with Dan at the Rivers Trust as well, and this was about bringing together guidance from across the country. And so the Leeds project very much helped to inform that guidance, and in particular this idea of not just thinking about things strategically or things from the bottom up, but trying to move towards the centre and use the best of both to really drive natural flood management projects forward. And so now we're starting to, or we have for a while, but it's now thinking about the next steps. What's next? How do we embed natural flood management and nature-based solutions into everything that we do? And Dan's going to talk a bit more about the next steps in terms of investment in nature-based solutions. But for me, we really want to widen the focus of what it is that we're doing, not just focusing on flood risk, but to think about other people we could get involved so that we can achieve more together. I honestly think it's really important to get started and build momentum. We can't just talk about these things. We need to show people what it is, and through doing things, achieve more. And And then to start to think about things a little bit differently, not on a project by project basis, but have clear mechanisms for being able to work across the landscape and see this as the way we do things in lots of different, not just being about flood management or about water quality management or about carbon reduction, but it's weaved into everything that we do. So by default, we're working with nature. And for us to do this, we really need to fully value the benefits of nature and bring that into our thoughts so that we can enable this investment and action and keep the legacy of this Leeds project going into the future so that we really are that catalyst. It becomes that real catalyst for change across the region. So I'm going to pass on to Paul to tell us more about the Leeds project.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for letting me speak. So I'm a senior flood risk engineer working at McDonald, and today I'll be presenting on a collection of the lessons learned so far from the Leeds NFM. So I'll focus on a little bit of background to the project. Hopefully those of you based in Leeds today are loosely aware of it. Also then look at one of the initial pilot sites that we undertook to get that momentum going. That's Milesville Farm. I'll then talk about the NFM sites platform that we've developed that took all the learning from that pilot site and looked to upscale from site level to catchment level, the work that we've done. So the Leeds Natural Flood Management Project is the Environment Agency's largest NFM project, and it will enhance the climate resilience of the flood alleviation scheme being undertaken in Leeds. And it will do that by offsetting the predicted impact of climate change up to 2069, which is the equivalent of reducing flood flows in the 0.5% flood event by up to 5%. So the flood alleviation scheme throughout the city is required as a result of the numerous historic flood events. However, with climate change, it's recognised that building the walls higher and higher isn't a sustainable solution, and that we need to look at alternative methods to manage flooding. So natural flood management is a catchment-wide, low carbon and nature-based solution that works in complementary way with the traditional flood alleviation scheme, and it looks to slow and store floodwaters upstream of Leeds within the catchment. And you can see on this figure here some of the examples of what natural flood management includes. As we've developed the project from the initial outset, we've moved to focusing towards two primary areas. So woodland creation with an aspiration to plant 2 million trees, and also focus on improving soil health and therefore retaining the water through natural processes within the soil. And so in order to do that, we're looking at woodland creation both throughout the catchment, but in the floodplain and riparian settings as well. And as well as soil health, there's elements such as buffer strips and hedgerows that can improve that soil and land management. So when we set out to undertake these pilot projects, a key consideration was the Environment Agency's project development life cycle. You can see here the 7 stages that projects in the Environment Agency go through. So starting first with brief, and then in response to that brief, developing a concept. Once that concept or initial idea is developed, they'll look to define it and refine it, and then as a result of that, you end up with a final design suitable for delivery. Once it's delivered, then we hand over either back to an owner or a landowner. And finally, once that's completed, we move into this cycle of monitoring and perhaps adapting it to make sure it's functioning as it was originally intended. So the figures on the right here show the catchment, the different local authorities, and the location of 4 pilot sites within the paper. Marlfield Farm was one of the first pilot sites to look at traditional family farms within the catchment. And so there's real focus on understanding what the farm community and the landowners wanted of the NFM work. Another element of the pilot was focusing on the Environment Agency leading delivery. So some of the other pilots tested different organisations delivering, but this one focused on the Environment Agency. And so that comprised in-house staff within the Environment Agency, but also their framework suppliers, which included what we've done. I'll just take this moment to recognise the family whose farm it is and the benefit that they've given to the scheme through volunteering their land. They're really passionate about environmental causes and manage their farm in a sustainable way. So there's a real alignment with their values and the way that they manage their land. So after the brief, we move into concept. So that's the conception of a solution, typically a sketch showing an initial idea for design. It's really that broad outline of function and form. And you can see here some of the overland flow that was experienced on the farm prior to implementation. So the concept stage was undertaken by Jenny Barlow as the Environment Agency's flood risk advisor, and she used the wider knowledge within her team, but also that from Don Vine and the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. Looking at the types of things that have been done in the catchment already and that would be suitable in this farm setting. The outcome of that, agreed with the landowners from a site walkover, from a series of them, was a sketch with annotations on a simple map showing where there are opportunities for NFM within that farm setting. So it's at this point that McDonald's were included in the project and asked to develop the design suitable that a contractor could deliver the work as a contractor only, and therefore all the design work undertaken prior to them being involved. So we were responsible for preliminary design, and essentially that's the high level design, and it bridges this gap between the concept set that you've seen and the detailed design, which is fit for a contractor to take on. And it's worth noting about definition that it's a sort of grey area really between the concept and the detailed design, and it's almost how much effort and time and money you might want to spend developing those proposals to get perhaps cost certainty or programme certainty, or one of the sort of elements of the design. So what did we do in design development? We undertook a number of desk and field-based surveys. So we did utility searches. We had an ecology walkover, producing a habitat map. We referenced design guidance, including the SUDS manual, as well as the Environment Agency's SHUCOP, which stands for Safety, Health, Environmental and Welfare Code of Practice. And that outlines the processes that they need to follow to deliver a site safely. We also looked at the LiDAR, and from that the overland flow route, and particularly the sort of catchment areas within the watersheds within the site. And essentially it resulted in us identifying the sort of channels which we could intercept these flows. So the outcome from this preliminary design was a master plan, a layout, and it showed where the NFM measures would be suitable, the sort of size and scale of these, and we were able to agree this with both the project client, but also the landowners and others involved. And this was used for consultation, where other partners needed to understand what we proposed. I'm just going to pause at this moment with a short safety moment. Working in a rural setting, you might often think that there's not as many hazards as in an urban area, but this webcam footage from the farm owners really highlights some of the risks that are still present in a rural environment. So this tree was standing, and then it wasn't. And you can see the size of this and the impact it had. And you can actually, because this happened after the works, you can see the location of fencing and NFM features. And so a real consideration, and this comes through the Environment Agency's sort of safety first mantra, was considering the hazards and communicating those risks to the people who are going to be on site. And we did this through a hazard plan or a hazard map, and it shows the known hazards on the site and communicates them in a way that others can be made aware of them. You can see there's quite a few. You know, there were things like buried wells. There were other features, particularly around utilities crossing the site, that were really important to communicate. So then we moved on to the detailed design, and this is the complete and precise physical description of all parts of the structure to be constructed, and essentially the contractor should be left to do everything without having to constantly ask, oh, what did you mean by this? How do I implement this? So it's really, it's a lot of information, but it enables that cost certainty for the client, and it also means that they're free to complete it any way they want. So when we looked at the detailed design, part of the consideration was the construction phasing, and they knew that they wanted to split the work into 2 stages. So we have a planting season, typically in the winter months, but then it's wet and boggy, so you don't want to be doing earthworks in the winter, and so you have a earthwork season in the summer. So the first phase focused on that planting, hedgerows. We put some buffer zones, which are sort of corners of the fields with planting. And a number of individual trees. In the second phase, then we looked to the leaky barriers, and more importantly, the ponds and the sort of earthworks in that. And so the outcome of our work was 26 construction drawings, and these were all passed with additional information to the contractors for bidding and then delivering. So. We produced the master plan, both for phase 1 and phase 2, to show where within the site these different works were proposed. We had a hedgerow plan showing setting out and planting specification, as well as fencing details and gate details. For the individual trees, again, we had a setting out and planting specification, a detail for how those heavy standard trees should be planted, as well as a guard for excluding livestock around the tree. For the buffer zones, again, we had planting plans and equally fencing set out drawing. For the leaky barriers, we took a modular design approach, so we tried to standardise as much of these. And have sort of generic dimensions that could then be specified for individual locations, enabling repeat use of these modular designs. And similarly with the habitat fund, we had setting out, planting, earthworks, and a standard detail. We then moved on to delivery, and at this point I'd like to thank Brendan Wickstrom and the team at the River Stewardship Company who undertook the works. So you can see here them creating the wetland scrapes, undertaking the landscape planting, hedgerows, implementing leaky barriers. These are what we call timber sleeper design ones. Then we have the timber stake design ones, construction for fence posts, and then a dry stone wall reconstruction. And here's the seasonal habitat from informed and a diversion channel to consider flow. So the next stage then is handover. So once the works were completed, on the project, the landowners are responsible for upkeep and maintenance of them. The Proctor family are really engaged, and they've facilitated a number of visits from working groups and those that want to learn. So this sort of demonstration site is really taken on. And you can see how the features are sort of naturalised and the hedges have really started to establish. Really good. So then we move on to monitoring. So this is a real advantage of this site being a family farm. The farmhouse and where they live is literally in the centre. So when it's raining, they can see the NFM from their front room window. We've got some really good footage, and I'll show this shortly, of Storm Aire. On the 9th of February 2020, this is one of the sort of biggest storm events that have occurred in Aire since the work was implemented.
All of the pressure is now on Vix. All of it. Everyone's watching you.
So this is some footage that Dan took during that storm event. So you can see here the timber sleeper barriers. These are in channel. These channels are normally dry, but during flood events, running water. One of the larger channels on the site. Then we've got some of the field buffer corners with those sort of wetland scrapes. So these are sort of formed like mini ponds, really, that the water cascade through. Again, it's not large amounts of storage, but it's just showing the way these features can work. These are more of the barriers. This is probably the largest one holding that water, and the one upstream is the woven hazel one that acts as a sort of a trash screen to intercept flow. And these are some of the infield ones. So we found in the channels they're really storing out. And these are the two seasonal habitat ponds. And you can just see this is the diversion channel that was intercepting some of the overland flow. So just to add in terms of the monitoring, something that really came back from the landowners was actually the environmental and the wider benefits. So these features weren't just performing in that flood event that you saw. Day to day, they were providing environmental benefits as well as that sort of occasional flood risk benefit. I don't want to overlook that, it's really important. Just to summarise, so Marford Farm was a demonstration site and it enabled us to trial NFM measures which would be suitable in a farm setting. So it was really important to get that sort of rural acceptance. We followed the full EA development process. We did this really to test which bits were appropriate, which would be overkill, and to sort of refine that sweet spot for efficiency. At the time, there was limited design guidance, so there were quite a few sort of initial guides, but nothing with sort of meat and detail. So we, at the time, developed project-specific guidance, but as Emma mentioned, that was sort of consumed into the Syria guide, as that was produced at a later date. And yeah, the landowner feedback was really good. So they were really pleased with the development process, being shown the designs and getting involved in that way. But also seeing the measures working and the environmental benefits. They felt there was, those multiple benefits. And then, as sort of to summarise, really, the key learning was that this process and the sort of effort and the time that went into this one site it wasn't appropriate to copy and to repeat on hundreds of sites. So we needed to look at a way that could replicate some of the aspects of this and give us the confidence and the sort of robustness of the process, but do it in a more efficient way. That brings me then on to NFM sites. So we've developed a platform which hosts a suite of digital tools to enable the Leeds NFM project to deliver hundreds of sites and within them thousands of NFM interventions over the next 3 years. The platform incorporates tools and applications that support the project team as they identify potential sites together with landowners and they develop those proposals and then deliver NFM at a catchment scale. So underpinning all of this is better information management, or BIM. So we've used the cloud storage approach using the Esri ArcGIS Online to enable access to the platform from laptop, desktop or iPad. And this better information management aligns fully with the Environment Agency's development stages. And the grey area above the numbers indicates how, as you go through these stages, you sort of drip feed information into the system. And as you do that through each of these stages, by the time you get to the end, instead of scrabbling around trying to gather everything, it's already there and you're just refreshing it. So it's about efficient and straightforward data management. So within those 7 stages then, we've developed a suite of 13 tools. You can see them here. So what I'll do is I'll just give a quick overview of those tools and how they help deliver the project. So the first one is identify site, and this map shows the catchment area and with red line boundaries identifying the site for working. Within this tool, the users can review a land bank, which shows all the land ownership within the catchment, which the project team are aware of. So all the partners have shared their land holdings, and we can see where they are and avoid people treading on other people's feet. As well as that coordination element, the user can then draw their site, and that sort of sterilises that area, saying this is, I'm engaging with this landowner. And then they can work through the remaining process on the project. So at this initial stage, they've just drawn that red line boundary. We know people really just want to dive in and see stuff. So the site potential tool enables them to look at opportunity mappings for different NFM measures and whether or not they're appropriate within that site, but also early consideration of constraints mapping. So this might be environmental constraints, or as written on the screen, it might be utilities constraints. So if you know that there's an underground cable right where you're thinking that you could dig a new pond, you might want to think again before you start getting too far. So once an authorisation process has been undertaken to confirm that that site is appropriate to visit, we have an automated desk study tool, and this includes 2 key focuses. First, the environmental considerations. So in addition to the ones that were presented earlier, there's much more in-depth environmental information, giving a full understanding of a wide range of environmental considerations for each site, both within the site, but also more importantly in the vicinity. So you might have something just over the fence. We also produce the desktop hazards, and this is a fully automated map, which is produced automatically for every site, showing the known hazards based on map data sets. And rather than starting with a blank sheet of paper for your hazard map, you've already got something that you can start thinking, oh, I didn't know about that. And some of it might be wrong based on the data in the mapping, and you can start then validating it as you go through that site process. Part of the project has included the use of a landowner engagement team with individuals from a range of different organisations. So we developed the planner site visit tool to help coordinate these different visits. So we wanted a sort of management level to be able to see who was visiting where and what they were doing. And we've been able to embed in that a number of health and safety considerations for the individuals who might be lone working or out in the catchment. Things like where the nearest hospital, defibrillator and other features. It also includes a route planning tool, so carbon and the emissions from the project can be monitored. So the next stage is to go out to site and develop a site concept with the landowner. So using Esri software, we're able to do that on an iPad, and then when they come back into the office or at home, they can then access back on the website and make any updates. This is simple drawing points, lines and polygons to represent NFM features. But within this process, we can then produce this concept summary, which shows like a mini bill of quantities as to what's proposed and the sort of magnitude of works on the site. This tool includes a review process as well, so that the Environment Agency can oversee what's proposed or that it meets their. We then have a site summary stage, which produces an automated summary of known information about the site. So in addition to the environmental and the health and safety considerations, there's sort of practical things in terms of in the vicinity and water courses and things like that. In the final stage of this tool is to confirm the delivery route decision. So the Environment Agency using a range of different delivery routes on the project. Depending on which routes selected, depends on how much further input is needed from the Environment Agency. If the site is going to be delivered by the Environment Agency in the same way to north of the farm, the National Environmental Assessment Service, or NEAS, need to understand if they should be involved in the site. So we have a screening tool that helps them review site information and evaluate it and determine what level of input, if required, is needed for that site on the project. And this includes a focus particularly on archaeology and landscape considerations, as these were seen as some of the key environmental considerations for this type of work. We then have a definition tool which enables the Environment Agency to update or amend that site concept, particularly if there's any environmental surveys or anything that results in changes to the scheme following that NEAS screening process. And then we move on to gathering pre-construction information. So this is a collection of information to inform either a designer or a design and build contractor to undertake work. So this is really important, and this is part of the health and safety and the construction design and management processes that underpin the Environment Agency workflows. So this tool helps collate everything that's already known in the project, as well as add that additional information to produce a PCI output. We then have a detailed site summary. So it's at this stage that once you know what the design is, you know what the pre-construction information is, that you can start looking at costs. And so we've introduced the cost tool, and this tool provides a cost estimate at this stage. And it does that using the quantities that are proposed. So we have a unit cost model on the project, so it knows that if a typical length of fencing or an area of woodland costs a certain amount, then if you multiply the area or the length on your site by those unit costs, then it can give you that indicative cost. You can also have bespoke costs or override the estimate if you know a certain cost within. An optional tool is for if the Environment Agency are undertaking an aspect of design, is the PCI designer tool, and that enables them to convey additional information that has been developed through sort of design phase. So passing on particularly a designer risk analysis or risk assessment associated with the work, and things like consideration of potential temporary work. We then move into delivery, and that happens outside of the tool. And once that delivery is complete, we return to what we call site data capture. And this stage enables the Environment Agency to look at those drawings that were issued and the designs that were issued before, and just make any modifications or amendments. If, say, for example, they planted an extra bit of woodland, or perhaps the fencing had to go around a certain area and it just needs adjusted. Once that data capture is complete, all of the information is held in the site records. And this then acts as your sort of one location to find the information about the project, what was delivered. We've got all of the site safety information that you've gathered to date, so that if anyone needs to go back to site, they've got a living file that they can find health and safety information about. And this tool is developed to a proof of concept stage, but it's the final stage really. Once you've delivered everything and you're happy, we envisage that in maybe 5-10 years time, you're going to need to go back and undertake that monitoring, make sure it's still there, and perhaps you're going to do a more regular evaluation of certain sites to see if it's performing in the way that you want to get those good risk benefit. Just to note that we incorporated into the tool something we call virtual site tour. So this is using a 360-degree camera to produce panoramic photos, very similar to if you've used Google Street View. And this enables us to get that sort of street view, but within a site that might be very remote, and it means that you can see what you saw in the back on site and you can revisit it. But perhaps more importantly, it hopefully minimises the number of people that need to actually go to site, and so you can reduce both health and safety, but also carbon from those sites as well. And that then is the suite of tools that we've developed to date on the project. And just to summarise some of the key lessons learned. So we've taken a digital by default approach to this project. And that aligns with the Environment Agency's BIM processes and their way of using innovative technology to streamline projects. We have a fully auditable platform that promotes best practice. We have a clear project process, and that element of going through those gateways and steps means that we understand where each site is and whether or not it's met those processes. We have a single source of the truth, so the aim is to put everything into one system rather than have it all in the folders and this person put it on a desktop, and all of that. It should be in one place, and if it's not there, it's not counted. We've embedded health, safety and environment and welfare throughout the whole process. This is really, really important. It's fundamental to delivering work safely. If you don't start safe at the beginning, you're not going to end safe at the end. And the same with environment. Consider those environmental constraints from the beginning, not as that's a surprise element. And it's really about providing that right information at the right time to users. And so by doing that in a consistent platform, we get that single record of project information, enabling better management and monitoring in the future, particularly considering the project aims to benefit until 2060. And we need to set up on the right foot to get there successfully. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for listening. And feel free to contact me if you've got any further questions or want. And then I think we'll be passing over to Dan.
Yeah, we'll be passing over to Dan. So Dan's going to do his best Chris Whitty impression with next slide, please. Dan, if you want to get ready, and we'll turn our in the room webcam off. There's no one there to watch anymore.
Good stuff. Okie doke. So if we go on to my slides, that's right. Brilliant. Yeah, so hi, I'm Dan Turner. I'm technical lead for land management and market creation at the Rivers Trust, and it's a pleasure to be invited here today to talk to you about the work that we're doing with the Leeds NFM programme. So if we go on to the next slide. So Paul covered a bit of this already, but Leeds has suffered from a long history of flooding. Most recently in 2015 and February 2020, and the Boxing Day 2015 floods affected over 4,000 homes and almost 2,000 businesses in Leeds City region, and as defined by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, the cost being close to £500 million. But in addition, as well, like many of our upland catchments, the Aire catchment above Leeds is also impacted from several different sources, from heavily modified river as a result of the Industrial Revolution, also a lack of biodiversity and poor water quality. So we go on to the next slide. So the primary focus of the Leeds NFM programme is a 5% peak flow reduction through a highly targeted NFM intervention in the upper catchment. But we also know that these NFM interventions will also deliver several other benefits through improved water quality and quantity, carbon sequestration, habitat creation, renaturalisation of the river, and also the associated socio-economic benefits as well. So next slide. So obviously Paul gave a give a really good overview of some of those NFM sites, but this is just a quick overview of delivery to date. So the Leeds NFM programme launched in 2018 and has worked with over 50 farmers and landowners, delivering over 450 hectares of soil aeration, 13 kilometres of hedgerows, and nearly 500,000 trees. But there is currently a bit of a funding gap of up to £3 million to deliver the aims and ambitions of the Leeds NFM programme, and also recognising that all these NFM interventions need to be maintained in the future, and also that kind of legacy of the project. So you on to the next slide. So what do we want to do, and why are we working with the Leeds NFM programme? Well, principally we're here to support the ambitions of the Leeds NFM programme, delivering a peak flow reduction of 5% in a 1 in 200 year flood event at Leeds. And this will be achieved by delivering and including 2 million trees and aeration of over 12,000 hectares of land. But we also need to look at that kind of funding gap, and we are looking to achieve this by the development of an innovative financing mechanism in line with the 25-year environment plan, attracting £3 million of private investment and entering into long-term contracts with farmers and landowners to host and maintain those NFM interventions for the long term, and ensure that we are continuing to deliver flood risk. So we go on to the next slide. So I guess these are the kind of the interesting slides from me. So this project is building on the success of the Wire NFM Investment Readiness Project, which was one of the first examples of a market-led approach based around ecosystem services and NFM. And then we used a debt-based model approach, which is looked at securing green investment from investors, which can then be repaid over several years by a range of organisations, which will benefit from flood risk reduction and those other benefits from the project. So this slide here, you can see this is a transactional model. And at first glance, it can seem fairly complex, but I like to think of it like any other startup business, which needs to raise investment to get going, and the product we're actually selling is ecosystem services. So at the heart of this project was a special purpose vehicle, which will draw down external investment finance to fund the capital delivery, which will then be repaid over a 9-year period through contracts with buyers, so those that will benefit from the intervention, and sellers, so farmers and landowners who will host that NFM intervention. But essentially, this is a social enterprise model. The SPV will be set up as a community interest company limited by guarantee, and importantly, this will have an asset lock on it. So if there's any retained profit in that entity, that has to go towards further catchment interventions. So we go on to the next slide. So we actually completed the Wire NFM Investment Readiness Project late last year, and this slide just gives a bit of context to the structure and how we manage risk through this project as well. So we established the Wire NFM Community Interest Company, which is a not-for-profit entity, and it's governed by a board of directors, which all represent the key stakeholders in this catchment. And I think this is really important to kind of emphasise. So the farmers and the landowners have just as much right and kind of input into the SPV as the buyers, the investors, etc. So it's quite a kind of social enterprise model. So the CIC raised £800,000 of external investment, which is then repaid by a consortium of buyers who collectively pay £220,000 a year for 9 years based on a performance-based ecosystem service contract. So as you hear, we've got 5 buyers of ecosystem services, and they all benefit from that flood risk reduction in the wire for various different reasons. And then we have entered into contracts with farmers and landowners, and they're paid to host and maintain those interventions on the ground. And this is also really important to ensure, if we want to make sure that farmers are going to kind of value these assets as part of their farm business, we need to make sure that they are paid to look after it, and they look at these things just like any other product they are delivering on their farm. So those farmers have entered into that contract. It's a bit different to say countryside stewardship, because they're a bit more flexible, the contracts, but also they're all kind of index linked as well, which is quite nice. So the CIC is actually very transactional in nature. Nobody works for the company. Instead, it has contracts with various delivery partners. So in this case, the Wyre Rivers Trust, as the local Rivers Trust, will be responsible for the delivery of the project, and the Rivers Trust centrally actually just manage the CIC. So tax, business, things associated with the CIC. So we are now looking at how we take and scale this approach to the Leeds NFM programme, with the main focus being on, that long-term maintenance of the NFM, and how do we ensure we are paying farmers in the future, and that these interventions are going to be embedded in the landscape. Help incentivise the uptake of NFM to ensure that we, meet that 5% peak flow reduction, and also enable the delivery of some, more NFM interventions, and enable an integrated catchment solution. So we go on to the final slide. So this is just a bit of a kind of an overview of some of the steps that we're going to go through to do this. So these are the main work packages. So obviously understanding those services that are delivered from the NFM, so ecosystem services, so quantification and validation, buyers, so mapping and understanding who those buyers of ecosystem services might be, engaging with sellers, so farmers and landowners, and really enabling a process in which farmers are co-designing this with us, so they feel like they are very much part of that project. And then there's a whole element around governance. So what does that SPV structure look like? So what worked in the Wyre might not work in the Leeds NFM programme, but all part of that is developing that entity and some of those legal contracts. Then there's the work stream around financial modelling, so modelling the finances over a kind of the next 50 years, and looking at those flows of capital, and that kind of development of the business plan. And then at the end, that kind of the requirement for investment, if there is a gap, and we might need to raise investment to get it going. So yeah, hopefully that's been a good overview. But yeah, it's early days, but lots of progress. So thank you very much.